needed to update you and tell you new things that have been going on with the programs. Maybe you guys had some turnover in your schools and you needed to train, some new staff members, but most importantly, how we've adapted this program to address what's going on in learning right now during the COVID-19 crisis. So today was kind of a little bit of an overview of what the program looks like, what we've changed, how it's going to change, what the booster sessions you can expect to get from. And I just want to, again, mention that this is offered through the Mental Health Association, Monmouth County. We've been very fortunate enough to receive a grant that allows us to continue to do this work from the Monmouth County freeholders. And this is a partnership that we've developed with the Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide, as well as the YMCA of Greater Monmouth County. So again, today, what we're going to just talk about, for those of you, I see a couple of people just popped in, we're going to continue to kind of update you on what Lifelines is, what it looks like, how it's changed for COVID. Your presenters today are myself, Nicole, Nolan, and I have Maureen Underwood, our national expert on suicide prevention, as well as the author of all 3 pieces of the Lifelines curriculum. So we're just going to hop right into it. And what we wanted you to know. So today, how to support students remotely. This is a huge question that I've been getting across the board. How do we adapt some of the forms that we have to go online? Are they appropriate for Google Docs? Can we put them in a Google form? All of those types of questions that you guys have, been asking. We're going to figure out in these Lifelines booster sessions how to adapt for maybe you're virtual, maybe you're hybrid, maybe you're preparing to go back into your school buildings, maybe you're already back in your school buildings. How do we keep supporting our students during a time like this? What changes have been made to the curriculum? There have been some, so we're really excited to talk about that today. How to get more training remotely. Maureen is going to talk about, what this new platform looks like if you are looking to have Lifelines trainings in a whole, like you haven't started yet, you need to have the full 3 sessions. Maybe you just need a refresher. Maybe you need some, information here or there, what our training looks like now, and how we've been able to modify that for teachers who are teaching from home. Finally, we always want to end on how we can take care of ourselves. As somebody who is in a school myself and working with you guys, it's been critical that we have increased our self-care. It was something that we've always talked about before, maybe fell to the wayside, but there's definitely more of a focus right now on how educators and people in the school system, I know that I see ourselves as essential workers. We really, put our boots on and made it up to the front lines starting in September, so how we're making sure that we're coming up for air as well, because some of these days are really long. Even though they're 8 hours, they may seem like it's been 2 weeks. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to review the updated essentials of Lifelines. We're going to put Lifelines into a trauma-informed context. We know that this is a big focus, not only in our state, but nationally, that schools are moving into a trauma-informed care model. We're going to explain the new trilogy components. I'm going to describe the online implementation strategies, how you guys can do that in this new setting. And then again, we're going to end by highlighting self-care and how we can take care of ourselves and our staff and faculty. I'm going to hand it over now to Maureen, who's going to start us with just going over a little bit of the Lifelines essentials.
Thanks, Nicole. First of all, I want to join Nicole in thanking you all for taking time out of a busy schedule, an overwhelming schedule, I think, for many of you, and taking an hour out to listen to information about Lifelines. As Nicole mentioned, myself and John Califat were the creator of Lifelines in the 1980s. And it was one of the first school-based programs for suicide prevention in the country. And it's one of those things I always kind of sit back and have to pinch myself to think, it was so solid when we started it. We've added, we've adapted, and it's still here today. And I think that speaks to the foundation and the support that's underneath it, which is why I always like to tell you a little bit about why it works. It was grounded in theory from the very, very beginning, and it reflects that public health perspective that believes in universal prevention strategies. That's the first thing, is, the fact that there is a true belief in prevention. And I think for many of us prior to COVID, public health was just this nebulous concept of what does that mean? And, you know, I often joke about the word epidemiologist. I think that if you'd asked most people what that meant before COVID, may have been something like maybe like a ventriloquist or something, epidemiologist. It's become part of our public vocabulary, and public health has become part of that vocabulary. And it basically means basically means that we have a universal prevention perspective, and it involves everyone in the community. Lifelines is the only comprehensive suicide prevention program that's there. And again, it comes from my background as a social worker. John was a community psychologist. He taught at Rutgers. And we really believe from the very beginning that unless you had everyone in the school community coming from the same approach, there was just no way it was ever going to last. I'm sure you all know programs in your schools that you've put in where you had one champion and it was great and it was terrific. And then after that person left, the program died. So we really knew it was important to start with policies and protocols that your administrators, that your board agreed on, and sort of trickle down the Lifelines philosophy so everyone in the school knew the same message. The other thing we did from the very beginning, and I think it was because at that time, John and I were at St. Clair's up in Denville at the Community Mental Health Center, was the reality that we understood that community mental health really was a little different than clinical mental health issues, and that if we were going to get into schools, we had to consider what the mission was of the schools and make sure everything we did talked to that mission, which is, as you all know, to provide a safe learning environment for all your students. So Lifelines comes from that perspective of safety. Everything in it is embedded in safety. And as we started to transition some of the elements to remote learning, safety was really the primary thing we considered. The last piece of this, in terms of essential, is that we focused on increasing those two protective factors of asking for help and identifying trusted adults. And the reason I want to point these out is that these are important for kids under any circumstance, and they're particularly important during COVID. So the transition of some of the basic principles of Lifelines to the time of COVID has been there all along. From the very, very beginning, we used a trauma-informed perspective. And Nicole, if you could just change to our next slide, we can take a look at what the essence of a trauma-informed school are. The reason we never pointed it out per se is really because it was just sort of best practice. Of course you were going to do these things. And, you know, I remember many, many, many years ago, in my high school Latin class at Red Bank Catholic, I had a nun who talked about there's nothing new under the sun. And, you know, back then it didn't really make sense to me, like nothing new under the sun, what's she talking about? But it is really true. Trauma-informed schools should be the way schools have worked all along. It's just now it's been pulled out and it's been made into a thing. So I'm just going to take you through this because, again, this is the current buzzword. And I want you to know how Lifelines has paid attention to this all along. Communicating compassionately, and this is not, if we think again about suicide, we know that a suicide is a trauma. It's traumatic for the person feeling those difficult feelings, for anyone who knows them, for the school that endures losses related to suicide. So that communication compassionately is really talking about a very difficult subject in a way that makes it a little easier to hear, not totally, but a little easier. And you'll see when we talk about some of the new components, how we've added a component about validation, because we realized it was often hard to validate a child who said, I want to die. It was a whole lot easier to say, oh, come on, you don't want to do that. So we focused on that so you can have a compassionate and effective response to that child. Empowering students any one of you who have taken Lifelines know, we think students are your most underutilized resource in the school. And now, especially in COVID, you better be using those kids because they're the ones who know what's happening. They're the ones who are online with their peers, especially if you're in a virtual environment. They know what's happening behind the scenes. So you have to empower them. And my sense of working with kids, which has really been my whole career, is that if you empower kids to take responsibility for themselves and each other, and you believe they will do that, the large percentage of those kids are going to. Certainly there's some who choose not to or can't, but the large percentage are going to do that. When we talk about understanding trauma, I'm going to fold in not just suicide into that conversation, but also help seeking. This isn't just about understanding things that are traumatic. It's also understanding good things. It's also understanding, for example, what it means to be a trusted adult. We throw that term around all the time, and yet I'm not so sure people know what it is. We focus on strengths. This is a wellness-based program, and building on relationships is where we really talk about the fact that you want to have those social connections and those trusted adults. And again, this is critically important right now during COVID. And if you want, I'm sure Nicole can talk about some of the other programs that we have available to you that focus on helping you building those relationships even in a virtual classroom. And of course, cultural sensitivity. This program, I will tell you from the very beginning, has been culturally neutral. We focus not necessarily on the way people culturally experience something, but in how they feel about it. And feelings, as you know, are universal. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. When you're feeling like you want to die, it feels the same way. So in terms of what's new, which is our next slide, you'll notice the order that we have them on here. This is the order. Originally, Prevention was the first book that we put out, and it came in response to a school. And I want to just highlight the fact that this meeting we're having this morning is so important because everything we've done in Lifelines has really been informed by what you all in schools have told us. Yes, we put the basic theory there because, as you know, you're hearing a lot about evidence-based, evidence-informed, best practices. It had to have that, but the ways in which it got implemented came from those of you in school settings who said to us, what about this? You know, we feel like you're missing that, or I'm not so sure this works quite well the way you have it. Could we do this a different way? And I will tell you, in Monmouth County, the experience that Nicole and Susan Talone and Lane Smith have had in the schools has been some of the content that's informed the new versions of this. So your words are on some of these pages, even though you may not know that. We really truly believe in collaboration. There's no way a person can work in a school all by themselves, and there's no way those of us in mental health can come into a school and tell you what to do. Please. And there are programs that do that. We feel like you've got the skills and expertise. We're just going to augment them or validate them, tell you you're doing what you need to do, because you are the ones who've made such important contributions to this model. And we hope you continue to do that through the rest of this academic year for sure, because some of the things we're going to share with you come from things we've learned in schools. So let's take a look at prevention and what's new in prevention. I'm not sure how many of you are doing this, but as I said, prevention was the first module that was out there. And when we did the first version, and these books were updated in 2018, and the videos have been updated in 2020. Some of the curriculum has been updated in 2020. So what I'll say to you is you're really kind of on, it's a contemporaneous program. This is not something that's been gathering dust on a show. We updated presentation for faculty, staff, and parents. Oh, we used to think back in the day that you could have 60 minutes to talk to your faculty and staff about something as critically important as suicide. I mean, come on, you couldn't find 60 minutes? Well, we know that sometimes you can't find 60 minutes. So we've got presentations now that can, I would tell you, don't quote me on this, you could probably do in 20 minutes if you had to with the key points. For many schools, you can get 30 minutes, but we've got those shorter presentations that, and again, Nicole has been known to do a lot of them in schools. So you, especially doing them virtually, it's something that our staff have the capacity to do. In terms of parent presentations, we again struggled, as you all have struggled, to get parents to come out for presentations, because we want parents to know what we're telling their kids, especially about something as serious as suicide. Well, I'll just share with you, in one school, we did an in-person presentation and we had 20 parents. And there were about 1,000 students in the school. And we thought, that's, you know, that's pretty good, 20 parents. I mean, I have been at presentations where we've had 5 or 10. Well, we did that very same presentation virtually and we got 100 parents. So what I'll say to you is the model for doing programs virtually will get a lot larger participation, and we have materials for parents that are translated into Spanish. There were some before, but now there's many more of them that are translated into Spanish. There's a couple of short videos that you all may have seen that you can use in messaging to your faculty. I have worked all over the country in doing Lifelines presentations, and the state of Georgia initially asked if I could make a couple of 5-minute videos that they could embed into some of their teacher training. And it turned out to be so effective, we gave them to you in the new prevention. And the reason that we do that is sometimes it's easier to step back and have somebody else say something. So it isn't because we don't think you can give the message, it just gives you a little bit of a break. We never had a 5th and 6th grade curriculum because we always thought 7th to 10th grade, that was about, you know, when we started in 2000, in the 1980s, that was appropriate. Now we had so many requests to say we need to talk to kids sooner than 7th grade. So we created a 5th and 6th grade curriculum. Nicole's going to talk to you about that in a little bit. But that was something that came as a request from schools, as did the 10th, the 11th, and the 12th grade curriculum. We had lots of folks who said, this, you know, your curriculum up to 7th grade to 10th grade is really, that's good. But when kids get to 11th grade, they're starting to think about leaving school. And in 12th grade, they might as well be out the door, and they're going to go into the real world totally unprepared for some stuff. So we thought about it. We looked at the literature because, again, as I said, we ground everything in theory and saw, that transition time after high school was a time when kids were really at elevated risk. I'm sure you've heard data about 18 to 24-year-olds, you know, who the risk kind of is a little bit lower in high school, and then it jumps up. So we created a curriculum for that. And finally, when we looked at the 7th and 10th grade curriculum as it exists for an in-person training, it's in the classroom. And we were a little bit concerned that if you were doing it remotely, that you didn't necessarily have your eyes on every kid who was in that class, which is one of the reasons it's safe to do in person. So rather than have you do that curriculum, we developed a new curriculum. It's only 2 sessions because we understand time pressures with new schedules, etc. And we actually, you have copies of that. In the old curriculum, when you eventually get back to teaching in person, you'll notice that we, the one session that had a 20-minute video section in it, we took that out and we recreated it into short segments that's only 10 minutes. That was based on your feedback and our recognition. Those of you who've looked at it know there was a girl in there who had a flip phone. We thought we were really cool when we put this thing together, and that just somehow distracted everybody when they looked at it, so we took the flip phone out. The student curriculum per se, if you can move to the next slide, Nicole, is really, we have educational principles that are employed in all the lessons, and in particular, we try to teach the same point from several different learning styles. That's why, in particular, there are usually multiple. We don't have just one session. We know from data that, yeah, it's interesting to have one class on something, but kids don't remember much. So we're doing reinforcement learning, and those of you who have done the curriculum know that you see the same message in a variety of ways. The other thing we never talked about, because it was just sort of there, was there's social emotional learning in every single one of these lessons. The principles we're teaching are social emotional, about help seeking, about not being judgmental, about you know, talking about your feelings rather than acting on your feelings. So it's a thread that runs through everything. We never thought we had to emphasize it, but now we realize that's another buzzword. So throw it in there if you need to. We don't use mental health jargon because, again, this is a school-based training. And mental health jargon, people get lost in that. I don't know about you, but I hear 10 people talk about depression. I ask them what the symptoms are, and they're all telling me something different. And especially now when a lot of people are sort of focusing on the trauma of COVID. Certainly, there are a lot of people who have been traumatized by COVID, absolutely. But there's a whole lot more that are really having chronic stress, which is very different. So we stay away from all of that, and we just talk about the behaviors that are creating some difficulties. We know that kids learn better content that's related to problems in their real life versus content that is just academically focused. So we include problems and their contemporary issues. Participatory learning, we've even incorporated in the one virtual lesson and in the other ones, the 5th and 6th and the 11th and 12th, which we think are safe to do virtually. There's participatory learning, which means you put your kids in small groups. And as I said, you know, this is trauma informed. And if you can just go to the next slide, Nicole, you'll see here's how this curriculum is trauma informed. We give that behavioral understanding of suicide. As I just said, we stay away from a mental health definition, which can be pathologizing. And we don't want to do that. So we really talk about it in terms of behavior. We encourage those caring conversations. And the way we do it, the students define the terms themselves, which, as you know, one of the components of all trauma-informed classroom work is that it provides students with agency, basically to step up and figure out how to incorporate this in their own lives. So the activities we have in the curriculum, who is your trusted adult? What are the characteristics? How does someone let you know they care? There's suggestions to increase student agency. Focusing on strength and not pathology, we actually talk about the courage of help seeking. I don't know any other program that phrases it that way, because it's brave to ask for help sometimes. You think about your own lives and you think about, you know, there's sometimes in it when it's hard to ask somebody for help, but it's the brave thing to do. So we talk about it that way. And again, those relationships with the supportive adults, it's a much stronger part of the new curriculum, especially the online curriculum, and that paramount need for safety is embedded in everything. And I think, as you know, as I just explained to you, what we did was we really took out the current 7th to 10th grade curriculum unless you're alive in the classroom because of the issue for safety. Now I'm going to turn this back to Nicole, who's going to take you through each of these pieces of curriculum one by one. Thanks, Nick.
All right, thanks, Maureen. All right, guys, so I feel like we just went through a huge amount of information in a very short period of time. So what I'm going to encourage you guys to do, of course, I think we're on some really good time track here. If you have any questions at all about anything that Maureen just said, go ahead and put it in the chat. We're going to have a Q&A kind of at the end of the presentation. But I just wanted to give us a second to come up for some air, take a big deep breath. You know, we talked a lot about trauma informed. We really went through a very comprehensive program in only 20 minutes. So give yourself a nice break. And I'm going to move into some of the actual curriculum pieces and start talking about what that looks like, what it's looked like before, what it looks like now, and how you're working that into your schools. So to start, the 5th and 6th grade curriculum. And like what Maureen had said, we hadn't had this previously. And then the data came out in 2014 that really had us concerned and told us that we absolutely needed to listen to what we were hearing in our communities, that suicide prevention conversations needed to start earlier. We saw a huge uptick statistically that was significant with the girl population, with females. And traditionally what it had been prior was, you know, boys usually die by suicide at a higher rate and girls attempt more frequently. And we saw those numbers starting to change, and we saw girls using more lethal means. And we saw a percentage increase in the age of basically 10 and up in dying by suicide of the female population. And we said to ourselves, we really need to start moving into 5th and 6th and having this conversation a little bit early. So that's where the data came from, and that's what reinforced, that's what makes this program evidence informed, is that we always look at the new data that comes out from either AAS or from the country or anywhere that, you know, we're really working with to make sure that our programs are best practices, but also that it's rooted in what's actually going on with our teens and with our adolescents, you know, as we speak. We're always updating the program. So if I can move to my next slide, the key points of the 5th and 6th grade curriculum. For those of you who have done it, this is a little bit of a refresher. For those of you who have maybe not yet implemented the 5th and 6th grade curriculum, this is going to be great for you guys to understand and realize maybe this is something that you want to start doing a little bit earlier in some of your schools. You know, I know that there's sometimes challenges. Some schools have a 5th through 8th middle school. Some of you guys go all the way up to 5th grade. Some of you guys are a K through 8 building. Again, this is all of the consulting and all of the work that I do with the Mental Health Association, is figuring out a plan that follows best practices and implementing the student curriculum. So it was developed in response to educator requests and that data that I spoke about from earlier. It recognizes the increasing attempts at earlier ages. We even saw that here in Monmouth County, that we were starting to see kids coming into the emergency room for suicidal ideation as young as kindergarten. You know, that was definitely something that was, of course, tragic, and we knew that we needed to do something about right away. And it really increased, you know, that need for social emotional learning, and, you know, was a big part of what the state has done to increase the mental health kind of components into our curriculum from K through 12. It uses the same theory base, help seeking and identification of a trusted adult. It flows nicely into that 7th and 10th grade curriculum. It sets the, you know, kind of foundation for thinking about this stuff, for thinking about, I'm noticing that something's wrong with my friends. Maybe I'm noticing something's wrong with me. Should I bury that deep down inside? Should I keep that secret? Or should I try and open up? Should I speak to a trusted adult? Who is a trusted adult? What are the qualities of those people? And who are those people in my school building? And start thinking about those people in a little bit of a different way and see some outcomes. That's what's really, really great about the videos in this curriculum particularly, is that it really walks somebody who is as young as 10 years old through what it looks like to get help for somebody that you're worried about. It kind of gives them that lived experience without really living it, to know that, hey, this could turn out okay, instead of all the scary things that I'm thinking, that I'm going to get my friend in trouble, that I'm going to get in trouble, that my friend is going to hate me, that I'm going to make it worse. We do really great jobs at using those video clips, those short lectures and activities to reinforce help-seeking behavior. And like what Maureen said, how it takes courage to be able to do that. I think even speaking from a counselor standpoint, outside of teaching this curriculum, whenever I see a kid who has a really hard time coming down to my office and speaking, the first thing I always congratulate them on is how courageous it must have been for them to enter my door and even be here and not even tell me what's going on, just physically getting down to my office and asking for that help. And you see this wave of confusion kind of come over their face because they've never thought about it as courageous. They've always thought about it as guilt or shame or some type of stigma that's associated with mental health and seeking help. So we start to reframe that for kids, and you really see a resiliency start to build. It recognizes social media as this teen adolescent communication style. A lot of the videos, for those of you who haven't seen it, are texting on phones. It's using FaceTime. It's all about how our kids actually communicate. It makes a lot of sense to them. With kids that I've done it with before, they thought that it was cool, that it looked like, you know, how they would communicate with their friends, how they could get on FaceTime. One of the big pieces of the curriculum that, you know, really I was adamant about getting in there is, you know, this difference between texting something to somebody and doing it in person or on FaceTime. You know, you ask somebody if it's okay, it's kind of easy for them in a text message to say, yeah, sure, I'm fine. But if you ask them face to face and you are concerned and you're doing all of these things, that is where you see the change, right? Like, we all know that in-person stuff is a lot better than what goes on behind screens. People are able to hide behind their screens, behind their Instagram names, behind their TikToks. You know, when you talk to somebody one-on-one, you know, those walls start to come down. So we start to have those conversations with kids about how you need to have social interactions that's not always rooted on your phone and in social media in the internet world. It includes a take-home letter for parents. This is, again, another reason why our program is best practice, is it because it informs your parents before we talk to them about what these things are going to include, what conversations are going to be had with your kids. Again, there's always the option for an opt-out. If parents are uncomfortable, maybe you've had a child who, may be going through a particularly rough time, maybe they're higher risk, maybe they've lost somebody to suicide. And while the program specifically doesn't speak about suicide directly in the 5th and 6th grade curriculum, giving somebody an opt-out, is something that we always do because it's trauma informed. But lastly, I have to say, in most of the schools that we've done this in, we've hardly ever gotten a statistically significant amount of opt-outs. Even in schools that have recently experienced a loss, that community came together. Like Maureen said, where people, you may have one or two that don't want to be included, but the majority of people care and they want to respond. And even in the aftermath of a loss, we've had students that have said, teach me how to prevent this from happening again. I need to make sure that I know what to do in case I'm ever worried about my friends. So how did we adapt this to virtual? The curriculum already has a limited discussion of suicide. It makes content safe for adaptation. So what I'm going to say to you guys is 5th and 6th grade component, write this down. You are able to deliver it as is in your textbooks directly to your students in either a virtual or a hybrid setting. You want to update that take-home letter and you want to explain the adaptations that your school specifically is making to parents. So if you're in a hybrid setting, you might want to say, this lesson and this lesson talks about this. We're going to be doing this virtually. It may be a session that you want to do with your kids if you have the time, or you may want to check in with them afterwards. Maybe if you are going into school 2 days a week for some of these kids, you're doing X lessons in school. Be as specific as possible for parents. Everybody has a lot going on right now. It's kind of hard to stay on top of everything. But however you're deciding to adapt it for your school's learning environment right now, make sure you're as specific as possible in those letters home to parents. And again, we're always here to help. So if you need a little bit of guidance on how to do that, you guys know my email and we'll talk about that a little bit more. It works best if it's co-taught. So this may be a little bit of a challenge for you guys who are still completely remote or completely virtual. But for instance, if I was a school counselor and I knew that my 5th or 6th grade, PE teachers or health teachers were teaching this, I might pop on with them in a Zoom setting like this, or if we're, doing it live in class, I would go and I would, reinforce that I'm the help, if you needed a help seeker or a trusted adult in your building, that's me, that's your teacher right here. You would go to your teacher, he would bring you to you. That's the best practice part, is connecting the dots for these kids as young as possible. So if you're able to invite somebody in on one of your lessons, I would encourage you to reach out to your school counselor early. Maybe it's, somebody else in your school building who that could be. But again, works best if it's co-taught. And that's really not an adaptation for virtual. That's something that we, promote as much as possible for the in-person, live in your building teaching as well. You want to make sure you can access the video segments online. So you guys have the DVDs that came with the textbooks when you guys were originally trained. If you don't have that, reach out to me and we'll see what we can do. Maybe your school can buy additional. What's really, really great right now is Hazelden, who produces all of our, training materials, has an online subscription. So if there are superintendents or administrators on the call, it's a low cost, it's a 3-year subscription that you get, and it's for everybody in your school building. So it may be a better investment for you guys to think about, instead of the one set of books that you need to share between all of, your different teachers who are doing this program. I would encourage you guys to reach out to me about that if that's something you're interested in increasing your capacity for your teachers to teach this model. When you put students in small groups for activities, have an adult supervisor. Make sure, if they're doing this virtual, that somebody's with them, just in case, something comes up in conversation that, you would want to have known if you were in person, you were live with your kids in your classroom. If kids were doing things in your classroom and those group activities were going on, I know that we're all walking around and we're having a listening ear or engaging in some of these small groups and some of their conversations. When we move this virtually, we may lose that a little bit. And this is certainly not a topic that we want to lose that on. So if you break them up into smaller groups for activities, if you even do that at all, I would encourage you guys to make sure that there's an adult supervisor with each group kind of having their own mini meetings. The 7th and 10th grade curriculum. Here's where I'm going to say my announcement for this one. This is the one that you absolutely have to adapt for virtual learning. You cannot do the curriculum sessions that are in your Lifelines book as is without adapting them to what we have currently. That is just because we feel that it's not trauma informed to deliver this in a virtual setting. If your school is back and is full sessions 5 days, and you have the structure, the support, control, and structure, our 3 favorite words, in your school building to be able to do it, then go ahead. You can continue with the 7th and 10th grade curriculum. But if you are virtual, or if you are hybrid, or if you're anything where your kids are not physically back in school 5 days a week, you are going to have to use the new curriculum that we have, those 2 sessions, in order to make it safe and best practice. I want to reiterate too that I know a lot of you throughout the years since we've started training, since we first got our grant to do this with the Mental Health Association in 2016, all of these schools that we've trained, the number one comment we got was those outdated videos in the 7th to 10th grade curriculum with, like Maureen said, the flip phones and the boys and girls talking in the lockers and all of those different things that maybe the kids didn't take too seriously. You felt that maybe the message was missed because of that. We have redone all of those videos. You need to get a new updated either online subscription to get those videos, or you need to purchase a new textbook, trilogy set or a prevention book with the DVD. Those have all been redone. They are great. We had a lot of input from kids. A lot of the actors that you've seen themselves are kids who have maybe gone through some issues or known friends, so they had input on it as well. So we really took to heart what you guys had to say about that, and I pushed very, very hard. Maureen could tell you how hard I pushed about getting those videos redone.
Oh, yes. All I'll have to say is Nicole was not their favorite person for however much money this cost, but she made it happen. So thank you, Nicole.
It had to happen. Listen, we knew that this was something that the kids needed, and I was very adamant about, continuing to do this. We had great post-vention pieces in grade 5th and 6th grade and 11th and 12th grade that we redid. They just spent all of this money on those new curriculums, and I said, how are you going to leave the 7th to 10th grade behind? So we updated those for you guys. So we have, the key points of the 7th and 10th grade curriculum. It empowers students on how to respond to peers. I cannot tell you how empowering and healing this is, especially for a school that's experienced a loss. I've worked directly in post-vention situations in Monmouth County where I've sat with kids. They've had concern about being in on a Lifeline session, and by the time they came out, they said, thank you for doing this. This has brought me healing. This has taught me what I could have done with my friend that I lost. This has taught me what I'm going to do with absolutely every single one of my friends moving forward. I now know who I can trust in this building. I've developed those relationships. Even kids who, your at-risk kids, your high-risk kids that you're worried about in school, they come out feeling empowered, knowing how to identify things in themselves and how to help their friends. It identifies characteristics of trusted adults. We have a lot of activities in there where, what are the qualities? Who is somebody that you would go to? Who is somebody that you wouldn't go to? All of those different things. And again, that's social emotional learning, right? It's teaching these kids how to be that person. If we're identifying it in adults, we're only modeling it for the kids that, hey, this is somebody I may want to be when I grow up, and these are the characteristics that maybe I should have some self-awareness on. It reinforces the limits on adolescents' responses. Again, this is super healing and empowering for kids. Sometimes they feel that they have the weight of the world on their shoulders, right? So they know this secret about their friend. They know their friend has outright said that they're thinking about dying, but they don't want to be disloyal. They don't want to betray their friends. They also don't want to get them in trouble. And this basically says to them, you can ask your friend directly about whether or not they're thinking about wanting to die. But when you get that answer, you immediately have to go to a trusted adult. You have to know that when you ask that question and you get that information, it is not on you. It can't be on you. And you could never, ever keep the secret of suicide. Kids have really resonated with that. I've asked in classes before when I've taught it, how many of you guys in here thought that you were allowed to ask your friends if they're thinking about dying? Usually get no hands. I said, what about now after learning about this? And I remember one peer leader, he was a senior, and he said, it is my absolute responsibility to ask people, not even my friends, but just genuinely anybody in the school that I'm concerned about, whether or not they're okay, and if I can get them to somebody who could help them. That was 4 sessions, 4 45-minute sessions completely changed this kid's view on whether or not he could help his community. It encourages help seeking, like I just said, identifies resources within the school. Sometimes schools have adapted that to even resources outside of the school, second floor, where are you going for help if it's outside of school hours and maybe, you don't want to talk to your friend's mom or your mom's not around, you need something right now. What does that look like? We've had some classes adapt this to include second floor where maybe they've made the phone call during their class so that kids can see that calling a helpline is really not as terrifying as they think it is. Uses reinforcement learning to highlight those objectives. And like I said, it's the updated 2020 new videos. So why did we create a virtual curriculum? We could not be sure that all students who would have a reaction to the discussions about suicide would be identified and followed up with. Again, this goes back to that co-teaching. So you have your teacher up there and they're teaching, and that school counselor is having eyes on the room saying, okay, maybe this student really is having a hard time hearing this message. You have a lot of kids who maybe come into your virtual learning scenarios and they keep their camera off. So you have no idea how they would be receiving the curriculum. We just felt that it wasn't safe and it wasn't trauma informed to put kids in a situation to talk about something as, traumatic as suicide without putting the reinforcements that makes this program best practice. It could create challenges with incomplete attendance. So for instance, if my main thing was if you taught this in person and then on a Monday and the kids that you have don't come back or Tuesday and your kids in your building that you're teaching that day don't come back until Monday, you really want them to have this information without the next lesson for X amount of days. Maybe you're teaching virtually like the whole way. It just really, kids maybe pop in for one piece and didn't get the whole piece, and then you're not able to update them on what it is that they missed or give missing assignments. We just felt there were too many gaps with incomplete attendance. Session 4 has a large amount of role plays in them. Doing virtually, we just knew that would be impossible. For you as the teacher to watch, to organize. There's too much room for, kids to put in their own spin on what it is. It doesn't give you the control that you need to really deliver this curriculum. So my main takeaway here for you guys, like I said before, the 7th to 10th grade curriculum that is in your books that you have done previous years before, you cannot do now. You must use the 2-session updated curriculum that we will provide to you. This curriculum introduces Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What makes it able to be delivered virtually is that it really focuses on identifying needs and reinforcing that importance of help seeking, just like the 5th and 6th grade curriculum really didn't focus too much on suicide specifically. It was more so on help seeking and identifying trusted adults. This is what we've done for the 7th through 10th grade as well. The 11th through 10th grade curriculum, which we've gotten such wonderful feedback from you guys on. Thank you again. This is a piece that we really felt strongly that we needed to have, especially at the time when we were redoing this in 2016 and 2017. We knew that we had a large number of losses, especially in our Monmouth County communities, of kids between 18 to 24, right in that area, either where they were about to transition out of high school, or they had transitioned out of high school already. So what does the 11th and 12th grade curriculum have? We have a crystal ball activity, super social emotional learning type stuff. What are we seeing into our future, and how do we get from here to there? Those realistic expectations. That was a big piece that I heard from you guys, is that you really felt sometimes our students here in Monmouth County were not realistic about what their next step in life would be, and they were almost setting themselves up for failure. The key points of this curriculum: it again flows nicely out of the 7th and 10th grade curriculum. Those help-seeking behaviors and qualities of, helpful people. It really addresses the assumptions that students have made about the future. And I want to talk about this for a minute because I think it's something that really impacts our adolescents, especially in high school today. And whenever I do our parent presentations, I speak about this so much. The impact that social media has had on our kids' expectations for life is huge. And what I mean about that is they go on Instagram and they see somebody at a university. It's halfway across the country. It's beautiful weather. They're going on these incredible trips to places, and you hardly ever see the struggle of being a college student, of being alone and away from your family, struggling with 5 classes, maybe even more if you're trying to graduate earlier. The academic, expectations have changed. You're more independent. You need to make friends, but this picture has been painted that life is beautiful. And I think this trickles down into when our parents take these kids out for college visits. They're going, to 5-star restaurants, and they're going to they're making a trip out of what's supposed to be an experience for transition. And, I've had a lot of kids come back, and a lot of kids come back directly into crisis saying what I expected the transition to college to look like was not what actually happened. And all of these pretty pictures on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok have really just reinforced this thing that I'm failing. Everybody else is having a great time at school, and I'm miserable, and I have no friends, and it's just not working for me. So we know that there's, a symptom of what we call like social media depression and things of that nature. So a lot of the videos you'll see in this curriculum have students that talk about, oh yeah, I thought I was going to Broadway because I was the best singer in my small town in Ohio. And when I got to New York, I realized I was probably the best singer out of a million other best singers. And my whole perspective on life changed, and I didn't really know how to handle it. Or for our students who are maybe not thinking about college, how they transitioned into working, or maybe they were going into a trades, reinforcing to kids that college isn't always the answer. Not everybody needs to go to college. And I think, that's a big piece of living here in Monmouth County. If you don't go away to school, you feel like a failure. So I really just need to reinforce that these videos do a great job at talking to kids about that. What do you see in your crystal ball? And how do you get from here to there? It also kind of talks about, okay, here to there, but what happens when there isn't a reality anymore? Something has happened and something has changed. Maybe you went into the military and you've been discharged. Maybe you had an injury and now that was your life's dream and you can't do it anymore. So how do we reassess when our plan for the future is no longer what the future looks like? I want you to consider, their current support system. We talk about that a lot, but also that those support systems are really going to change. The trusted adults that we had in high school are going to stay in high school, and we're going to move forward. How do we identify those? Identifying the support you want in the future, what those people look like. Maybe you didn't have the best experience with support when you were younger. So moving forward, this is your clean slate. What type of support do you want, and where do you expect to get it? It can be taught virtually with video capacity. Again, test the videos out first, make sure they work on your platform. And, it creates a lot of really great discussions for kids. I'm going to hand it back over to Maureen. I know that I had a couple of questions pop up during that, so I'm going to take a quick look at those now, and then I'm going to address those in a couple of minutes. Okay, guys? Thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to move through this quickly because I think the essence of what you needed was what Nicole was sharing. The reason that we talk about your role as that curriculum teacher, the reason that we did that was having someone from the school teach this curriculum increases the student perception of resource people within the school. And on one of the surveys that you all handed in, you talked about how kids who had been in your Lifelines class last spring came and approached you this fall and said to you they knew they could talk to you because you had been their Lifelines teacher and they were worried about a friend. So this is basically what you know ahead of time, and I just want you to know that you are so important in teaching this. You can co-teach it with someone from outside the school if you want, but it's really important for kids to see you. The next slide talks about intervention because we made some changes to intervention as well. Most of you are not going to be so concerned about intervention, but what we did was we included a whole separate chapter on those return to learn students, those kids who are at high risk and may be absent because of some suicide-related incident. We gave a lot more templates. We just love to give you papers. And even though you have the templates that may be on PDF, you can translate those to your school letterhead. We give you absolute permission to do that. This is about to make this be yours. And we talk a little bit more about some of the evidence-based assessment materials, the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, the safety plan. And because we needed to adapt these skills virtually, I'm going to go to the next slide, Nicole, and we're going to talk about how we do booster training. One of the things that's important to do is come up with a informational letter to families, letting them know how you're going to change your assessment and referral procedures when school is virtual. So we give you some suggestions about how to do that. We give you some suggestions of how do you engage your students virtually. Again, the basic information is the same because it's evidence-based, it's theory-based. It's how you do it is a little bit different. And we want to talk with you in particular because you may be using more outside resources. So we want to talk about how do you increase the effectiveness of that? Do you need to check with people, for example, to whom you make referrals in the community if they have sliding fee scales? Because we know the finances of many, many families have changed because of COVID. You need to make sure that there are people who will take them for less money. And I guarantee you in every single community, there are clinicians and practitioners who will do that. It's mostly part of our sort of social responsibility. You want to know if people do virtual therapy and do people have waiting lists, because you don't want to send a student for an assessment of suicide risk if they have to go on a waiting list. The next slide shows us about postvention. And again, this was always trauma informed. We've given you a revised policy and procedures. And what we wanted to do was relate this to your school safety plans for everything else, including, you know, virtual settings and also about school shootings. So we give you an idea how this all fits together. But probably the most important thing that you're going to find in here is that we added a one-session student curriculum. Many, many schools said to us across the country, we've just had a death by suicide. We need to talk to students. How do we do it safely? So we give you a one-session curriculum that gives you a way to safely talk about to students about what happened and also about how to reinforce their resources and what they need to do to help themselves and each other. We also want to make it clear that postvention is trauma informed, and on the next slide you're going to see how we do that. Again, you've heard us talk about the compassionate way we talk about this. The piece on this slide that I think is the most important is recognizing the activities that may re-traumatize the school community. Some of the memorials, you know, that get put up as a way to honor somebody, absolutely know that that's what it's all about, is honoring the deceased, but they can re-traumatize other members of the school community. Quickly, I'll just say to you, one of the things I know lots of schools do is when it's graduation for a student who has died, they leave an empty seat as part of the graduation and, you know, sometimes put a rose on it or something else. And that's a lovely way to honor that student. But imagine if you're the student who's sitting on either side of that. Are you thinking about your graduation and all your accomplishments, or are you thinking about the student who should have been sitting next to you? So it's that kind of stuff that we talk about. Moving along to our next slide. Here's how we do booster training for postvention, and we have done this with schools. So this is not just kind of thinking about it. We've been working on this stuff since March, and we've been in several schools where we've done this virtually. We, again, want you to send letters out to your families, because one of the things that's majorly different in doing virtual postvention than real postvention in person is that when you're in person and you have to reach out to vulnerable students, you can go to their classroom, pull them out of class and say, hey, I know your friend just passed away. I'm just checking to see how you're doing. You may not be able to reach those students virtually, and the only way you may be able to reach them is through their parents. So we give you some guidelines of how to do that, and how to use social media to your advantage. I want to move along quickly because I want to give some time for questions. Taking care of each other and ourselves. This is the piece of trauma-informed care that always is missed. Always is missed. We always take care of kids before we take care of ourselves. And I want you to notice the little picture on here as one of the ways we take care of ourselves and each other is through our pets. Just a little thing. Okay, the next slide, Nicole. Here's the other ways. These are things that we know. Structure organizes chaos. So that's why the structure of the school day is so helpful. That's why you encourage parents when their kids are at home to structure those school days even virtually. We also know that helpfulness counteracts helplessness. So having kids engage in projects that help each other, help the community, helps deal with some of that helplessness we're getting really from COVID. And that also comes after we've lost someone. Death is the most helpless feeling we can have. So that's why that's important. It doesn't have to take hours to do self-care. You know, we really have some seminars that talk about that. You don't have to be positive all the time. Yeah, this little girl is smiling like to beat the band, but yeah, give her 5 minutes and she's probably going to be crying. And that's okay. Do things that surprise yourself. You know, my big surprise was doing TikTok. And it was even nicer because my granddaughter told me I did it better than her mother. So, and then laughter being the best medicine. And we're going to go to the next slide because that's my major self-coping. If you can't laugh at yourself, my grandpa told me, you're not doing enough stupid things. I told him I didn't usually run out of stupid things, but it's hard to laugh at anything that long. That's my self-care. Figure out what yours is. Nick?
Yeah, I love that. So let's see, what's next, you guys? We're gonna get to questions in 2 minutes, but I kind of want to go through what we're gonna be doing shortly for Lifelines. So I know a lot of you have received my email with the form in terms of dates that you need for training. We're gonna start going through those and getting our virtual trainers ready to deliver that content to you. Again, we can start having full-blown Lifelines trainings again after October 15th, once we really get everybody you know, accustomed to the virtual setting. So go ahead, fill out those forms. If you need that again, just reach out to me and I have no problem, you know, helping you get that form, and we will confirm dates and move forward. That is for the full Lifelines training. If you need postvention, intervention, prevention, the full day of training, you know, where we used to come to your school and really work with those different populations of people, we're able to do that virtually. Lifelines booster sessions are going to be these little mini meetings just like what we had today, based on what it is that you guys have told us that you needed. Today was our intro. We're planning on doing one on postvention, intervention, and prevention, and then we're going to have a closing up Lifelines booster session, but we plan on delivering these pretty much you know, within the next couple of months to you guys, probably once a month or twice a month until, you know, we figure out what it is that you guys need. So our next Lifelines booster session is probably going to be, I would say, either in November or early December, just given on what you guys feel your timelines are, what we're able to do with upcoming, you know, breaks or being away from school and things of that nature. If you have any insight, I would love to hear that in the chat as to when you guys would prefer to have it. But moving forward, Lifelines booster sessions, we're going to start with postvention and really work through what it is that virtual postvention looks like and what updated materials we've provided in the postvention book. That being said, I'm going to see if there are any questions in our chat. If anybody has kind of sent anything in, I don't see anything as of right now, but go ahead, you guys, take a couple of minutes, go in the chat. I know that I saw some hands raised before, but if you could kind of just, you know, send out some chat questions here about Lifelines, anything that you may have about moving forward. Maureen and I are more than happy to stay on for a couple of minutes and let you guys kind of pick our brains about Lifelines, especially in the times of COVID. When will we receive the new materials? Sure. So one of the new materials that we're able to offer at no cost is kind of the updated 2-part curriculum for that 7th and 10th. I will work with our team today in terms of getting that out to you guys, hopefully today, by the end of the day today. I don't see a problem in, you know, getting that email out. In terms of the new materials, if you're looking for the new 7th and 10th grade curriculum videos, that's going to require a purchase from Hazelden. If you contact me directly at my email, what I can do is I can put you in contact with our salesperson and they can give you that information on what pricing would look like. For your school district. Now, I will tell you that the online subscription is substantially cheaper than what our the physical textbooks look like. The upside to the online subscription is that you get updates throughout over the 3 years that you have the subscription, and there's unlimited users that you can register for the program. So if you have turnover or somebody changes in the 3 years, you can work with Hazelden and do that.
And I'm just going to say substantially cheaper, it's $350 for your entire school building. Each building has to have one, but you could have 20 people in your building to download it. So it really is a really good deal.
Mm-hmm. So are we getting the materials virtually? Yes. So the material that you're getting today, I just want to be clear about, is really just the 7th and 10th grade 2-part virtual curriculum. You should already have, if you're a Lifelines trained school, you already received basically what looks like a textbook, from us when we did the training. Somebody in your school building has those materials. So you already have them for the 5th and the 6th grade and the 11th and the 12th. If you are not a Lifelines trained school yet, you can contact me directly for Lifelines training, or I can confirm whether your school has been trained in the past since we started doing these programmings. But just to be clear, the materials that you will receive today are the 7th and 10th grade 2-session curriculums. I want to go up really quickly. I'm getting a lot of questions, so I want to see how many days between each lesson is recommended. So basically what we've recommended with the Lifelines program is that you deliver these over the course of basically like 2 weeks. So you give a couple of days here. Each session, depending on, so for instance, the original 7th grade curriculum is 4 sessions. So we would say you do 2 the first week and you do 2 the next week. You never ever want these lessons to go longer than a month. So some schools have done it where it's 1 lesson each week. So week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. Other schools have really said, they wanted to do it, over the course of 2 weeks. And then of course, I've had some schools that have just designated it as a week. If they are doing it in September for Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, they may do it the week of, September, National World Suicide Prevention Day. They may do it during Week of Respect. So you can't do it too fast. We just like to usually say, let kids come up for air since it's such a heavy topic, especially in the 7th and 10th grade. The 5th and 6th grade curriculum is also 4 parts. So, you can spread them out however you want, never taking longer than a month to deliver all the content to your kids. I would say probably the best model is two lessons a week, having it done over the course of 2 weeks. The 11th and 12th grade curriculum is only 2 sessions, so you can do that in 1 week. Let's see what other questions we have. Yes, so this was recorded today, what we are planning to do, and it may take us a little bit of time just to be honest with everything that we have going on. I will download this and we will be uploading it onto our training YouTube. Another thing that Maureen had mentioned at the beginning of our training is we have done so much work over the summer for schools, and you may not be aware of what we did. We did a lot of trauma-informed presentations. We have a counselor presentation for grades K through 8. We have a counselor presentation for high school. Those are all recorded, and we can send you the links to those as well. We also did a social emotional learning curriculum specific for COVID-19 and returning to school in that setting, both for full in-person and hybrid and virtual settings. I can't tell you as a counselor how much this curriculum has saved me time planning wise. I have done these, in school with my students. They were for grades K through 8. We have that training and that manual available for you as well. And it's been a total lifesaver. The kids have really, really enjoyed the activities there. So please reach out to me if you want those as well. Let's see. Yes, if you have specific questions about whether you're on track for the full training, I would just send me a quick email. It may be that your school has already done the full training in a previous year. Maybe you're new to the building and you just need to get trained. We are going to be offering a training coming up in the future for basically anybody who wants to pop in to postvention intervention and prevention. I'll have more information about that later on. Yes. So if you have the original copies and you're unable to provide new updated information, absolutely. You can continue to use that version that you have. It's not like anything's outdated. Everything is still best practice and rooted, in evidence-informed stuff. So it's not like you have old data or you have old information. Nothing in those, in the 2018 or, more updated book sets that we have is going to be wrong that you deliver to your kids. That's absolutely fine. The only real changes that have happened, we update postvention. As you can imagine, we're responding to postventions, more often than we would like to. And that information changes quite frequently. So we just have some more, resources for you there. The only thing that's changed really in prevention is that 7th to 10th grade, the videos that you have. So you may have some of the ones that the kids kind of consider outdated. We have more updated versions that use, iPhones and things of that nature that just make it a little bit easier to teach to your kids. Yes, again, if any of you guys need specific consultation regarding Lifelines, how you want to change it, maybe you need to update it, any types of things like that, go ahead and email me. My email is ndamore, DAMORE, at mentalhealthmonmouth.org. I'm more than happy to consult with you guys and get Lifelines going the way that you would like to, and give you some great, fresh, new ideas on the program. Maureen?
I just want to thank you all. I want to thank Nicole. You can hear she has as much passion for this program as I do, and she can help you translate that to your school community. So thank you all for being here. We're going to hopefully see you in some of the things we do in the future, and let us know what you want, because we are here to make it happen for you. So thank you. Stay safe. Have a good school year. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.